So I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Tim, Dad, around man's role in modern society. We've kind of touched on it, I think, through our various podcasts. You've given your perspective from the boomer side of things. I've given it mine more from the Xer. Are you a millennial by any chance? Hey, there we go. So Tim's millennial. We're going to get a third perspective here, Dad.
Wow, it is frightening.
Frightening or maybe enlightening, I'm thinking. So Tim, like, over to you, mate. Like, how you're obviously, doing mentoring and you have a particular opinion on this, but how do you see men's role in modern society? What do you think some of the challenges are?
Well, the role of men in society, I think fundamentally, you boil it down, hasn't changed. I think we're still all fathers, we're still brothers, we're still sons, we're still friends, and we're still, members of the community. It's just that the expectations around what it is to be a man have changed in many ways for the better, but it's still confusing now because it's still in flux and people don't really know, particularly in relationships and being a father, what they're supposed to do. But it's,
There's no guidebook that they say for parenthood, and there's no guidebook for malehood, or I guess, or femalehood, right? Where are these guidebooks?
Yeah, well, yeah. And even if there was a guidebook, you'd read it and it wouldn't work for everyone, right? There's so many permutations.
We never read instructions.
We don't want a guidebook. We want a guidebook, G-U-Y.
That's right.
Maybe you should write one, Tim. So you're saying that you mentioned the word expectation. So it's not just about what we've always done. It's around the expectation. And talk to us more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends who you talk to, but there's obviously the media is a big part of it, and the news and things like that, which seem to now just be informed by social media, which is almost just a rage machine. So it's all filtering through, and there's just a very negative perception of what men are, and then it's trying to tell us what we need to be. So there's a lot of it's about we need to be more caring, we need to be more empathetic, we need to be less violent, like all men are violent for some reason, which is just not what my experience is. So yeah, there's just those expectations. It's sort of, we're being held up to this, Jesus-like standard almost. Something that we can't actually achieve. I think that's the challenge at the minute, You're not allowed to be angry, but you've got to be emotional and in touch with your emotions. You're not, there's just sort of these things that don't, I think that's the challenge of being a man at the minute, You're supposed to communicate openly about your feelings in relationships and with people, but a big emotion I feel that we have is anger and frustration, and you can't show that without being said that you're
you want to protect
violent or aggressive or so I don't know. I think they're the challenges
Jim, can I ask something here? There are ways of articulating anger and frustration which aren't confrontational, but it does depend a lot on word choices, and men don't have the wide lexicon that women have.
True. And I think when you're angry too, your thoughts aren't clear. You're really touching your primal part of your brain. So if you need to communicate you're angry, you just be short and curt maybe, but you don't need to be hurtful or anything. And I've found that emotion in particular, because I've got a very strong fight reflex when things go wrong. So I just remove myself from the situation and come back when I've calmed down. So that's normally works for me. But sort of.
I think that's a very sensible mechanism, because I'm a man. I'm an older man. I don't get as angry as I used to, but I found that removing myself from the situation by saying, "Look, I'm very sorry. I've just got to go and get this out on my own, and I'll come back," is constructive.
Yes, definitely. And you are communicating your emotions then too. This has annoyed me, and I feel it's best if I take a break and come back with a clear head to talk about it further. So,
and that takes a degree of emotional intelligence, right? And you just mentioned something that I really believe in, Tim, that emotions up, intelligence or rational thought down. Decision making capability is reduced, because you've got that that reptilian part of your brain in the driver's seat. So, but to do that, you have to actually do work before that, I think, to actually get to a place where when you're tested. There's another expression that says, when you squeeze an orange, what's inside comes out, right? When pressure is applied, if you've already kind of, learned some lessons and practiced and thought about this in advance, maybe you're going to handle it a little bit differently than if it just is thrust upon you when you are straight to that, instinct. Do you agree with that? Or
Definitely. And I think that comes back to, men were always bottling up their emotions through the years, and then things would come out at home, or there'd be violence comes out at home, in days gone by. So yeah, doing the work, working through those emotions and shit and talking about those, definitely helps the juice not coming out when the pressure's on.
Yeah. So with regards then to expectations, what are these expectations and where are they coming from? You're saying media, okay, I get that, but why is the media picking up on it? And I'm kind of leading you in a little way here because I kind of got I've read some of the books, out there by some of the, the psychologists, male psychologists and what have you. And there is a very strong theme of men taking women's lead in a way in terms of what they want to see, and then men kind of moving along with that to keep them happy. And I don't know, what's your thoughts on the whole, it's a minefield, I know that. Well, what's your take on that sort of situation of the effeminization maybe of male kind of culture?
I'm not sure where it comes from, because it's impossible to say women think this and men think this, right? Because there's 3.5 billion women and 3.5 billion men, and they're all different. So I'm not sure where the pushes come from. It's obviously a progression, just a continuation of the liberation of women, which is a good thing. So yeah, it's just getting to I guess a peak of, we're not really sure how far it should go. I guess the expectations now are, though, that you need to have a high flying career, but you also need to be a fully available family man. There's just a lot of conflicting things. That's a good example straight away. Like, it's impossible, in my view, to have a very high flying career and also be available for all the family things. There's some things got to give. That's probably the example that's in focus for me, because I've got small children. And I made the choice to leave my job and move up to Port Macquarie so that I could spend more time with my children, which is a great decision to me. I love that. But it's not something everyone can make. It's not a decision. Yeah, so that's probably one expectation.
Sometimes the options aren't there for some people.
Yeah, I don't know the other ones. My relationship with my partner is very good. We're a good fit. I'm ambitious. Taz is not ambitious. She's much, but she's very focused on family and relationships. So we go well together, and we complement each other. But I think I've been lucky in that respect. So it's hard for me to talk about conflicting expectations in relationships, because I don't really have to deal with that. So,
hey, something again just that's come to mind, and Dad, this is just to loop you back in, because we are hearing a perspective of a millennial who's now chosen, and you've got a good career, and you've obviously got good qualifications, you've got options, and you've exercised some of those options to try and find that balance, right? To work and provide, but also have that time and devote it, because it's not going to last forever, to your family, your kids, and everything. That's interesting, Dad. How does that compare to, I guess, the way you had it? Because obviously, we're 3 different generations here, and it's just be interesting to sort of look at the changes over time and the options also.
Listening to Tim talk, it suddenly occurred to me that there's a multiplicity of different stages, but I'll just pick 2. The first is the formative stage, when you're a child and you look up to your parents and you see how your mother and your father interact. And you start to establish a very primitive sense of identity. Now, we move on through the teenage years, which are very confusing for both sexes. And the identity crisis is apparent there. And then later in life, say from the 20s onwards, we're now looking at social magnifiers like the media, like social media. So I want to separate the 2 from formative experience and then magnifiers much later down the track. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Yep, definitely.